Hello everybody, it's Daniel here, bringing you the GameX review for Gloria Victis from Black Eye Games today. Gloria Victis is a medieval MMO with a strong emphasis on crafting and mass-scale PvP. It's currently available on Steam Early Access and in an alpha build, so caution if you're diving into this, the game is not entirely finished. I discovered this as I was plunged into the ceaseless void upon my death. So that's cool. But alpha is alpha, so we can overlook a couple of these things. The bread and butter of your game here is going to be the mass-scale PvP. The world is split into a number of regions and towns that you're going to be conquering for your faction, and for each one that you gain control of, you'll not only see bonuses to the amount of experience you gain, but also the amount of materials that you'll have access to. Simply put, these regions are places like farms and mines, and by conquering them you're going to have access to those minerals and crops for you to harvest, so it feeds nicely into the crafting element in that way. At long last I can live out my days as a humble medieval farmer. There need not be any violence, but only the simple harvest of the wheat. Oh god, it grows back instantly. Oh, I'm gonna be here for the rest of my life. It's very nice to have actual consequence tied to the PvP in this way though, and if you're not up for capturing the local farms and mines, you also have tournaments that you can sign up for. These happen every few hours and you'll receive a server-wide notification when they're going live and have the chance to sign up. Basically, you're transported into a specific battleground where you're going to fight against the opposing faction. What's very interesting about this form of PvP is the openness of the world. Simply put, you're free to travel to wherever you like at whatever point in the game. There really isn't too much restriction as to where you can go. And this actually creates a bit of a problem for the game because, truth be told, I didn't know where I was supposed to go. It took me quite a number of hours just to figure out what I was supposed to be doing and where I was supposed to actually be going to fight to claim the objectives on the map. Simply put, you're thrown on into the world and offered no guidance whatsoever. Even the basics of combat are kind of just left blank. You'll have a sort of like text tutorial when you start up the game, but because you're not actually in combat at the start of that information is kind of lost by the time you actually get into your first battle. And I ended up feeling as if I was missing something to the game for the first couple of hours I was playing it, because I just couldn't figure out how to do these things until I went and consulted a whole bunch of guides. And this might just be the game's biggest issue, because it wants you to be free and do whatever you like, but it has no direction whatsoever. You're not sure what you want to do because you haven't really been told enough from the start. The PvE content doesn't help with this either because this game does away with conventional quests. You instead have daily objectives that you must complete by killing X number of enemies or crafting X number of items. For a lot of my time I just ended up roaming the countryside and killing everything on sight. I felt surprisingly like a Terminator that had gone AWOL. Looks like when I said I'd be back, I meant back in medieval times. The PvE is just a bit bare bones in comparison to other games of the genre, and it's in dire need of just being fleshed out a bit more. Don't get me wrong, I love killing things! But why do I kill things? I've been put on a list somewhere, haven't I? And speaking of killing things, the combat could use some fleshing out as well, because it's kind of basic in its current form. To the game's credit, the character progression is actually very refreshing in comparison to other MMOs. You're not locked into classes or anything like that. You don't have to specialize with weapons, and you can basically pick up whatever you find whenever you happen to find it, which is very, very nice because most MMOs sort of direct you down one path in that regard. But the actual combat is quite repetitive and in dire need of some variety. To the game's credit, it utilizes a stamina system that you see in games like Chivalry, which is very ideal for the medieval setting. It feels quite clunky in that regard, but intentionally so, and that's a very good thing. Unfortunately, there just isn't enough to do, and it doesn't feel polished enough in its current state. A lot of the time when you swing, you're not sure if your weapon's actually going to connect because you're not given enough feedback, and the animations on the characters are very, very stiff that you can't tell where your weapon is actually going to land. And it's really unfortunate because of that, because the combat is so important in a game like this that's based around PvP, because it's the thing you're going to be doing all the time, and it's just not really exciting enough in its current state. Again, to its credit, alpha is alpha, and they're going to be adding active abilities in to kind of vary it up at some point. Currently in character builds you only have access to the passive abilities, but in its current state it's not too great. Range combat is slightly better, but it could still use a little bit more happening just to make it a bit more interesting to actually engage the other person. Like, I want to relish in killing these people. I want to kill them in a variety of ways. I'm really going to be put on a list, haven't I? On a more positive note, the crafting's pretty fantastic in this game. Like, there's so much going on here, and there's so much for you to make, and so many resources to gather as well, that you can really spend a lot of your time in these menus. I like the system where if you make the same weapon over and over again, you get a chance of making a better quality version of that same weapon. It's a very interesting take on crafting that you don't really see happening in a lot of games of the genre. And it's very interesting when it comes to farming resources then, because you're going to be going back to the same places to gather these things. So if you're a fan of grinding, the crafting system is pretty great in that regard. If you're not a fan of grinding though, you're not really going to enjoy this system too much. Like, it is definitely intricately detailed and there's a lot going on here. It's definitely one of the stronger points of the game, but you have to be a nerd for this kind of stuff. You really do, and unfortunately in my time, I found the crafting system just a bit overwhelming. I felt like no matter what decision I'd made the worst one, and I had a continual feeling of dread as if I'd failed to study for a test that I was now filling in. In its aesthetic and presentation, it's a medieval environment and it captures this very well. In particular, the lighting has to be commended here because depending on the hour of the day, you might be seeing the sun rise or the sun set, and it's really beautiful. Just seeing it through the trees, and check out that grass. Like, this is like a postcard scene right here. This is great. Come to the medieval times. We might have the Black Death and smallpox around, but check out that grass. To sum up, Gloria Victis is a very interesting MMO. It has a lot of potential that is just in need of being fleshed out a bit more. The crafting system and the character progression is very, very interesting, and it's unlike most MMOs in those regards, yet it does suffer from the lack of guidance. You're not really sure what you're supposed to do with most of your time, and it takes quite a while to figure out your place in this world. But if you're interested in a fresh take on MMOs and are interested in helping the development of this game as it struggles through the alpha, then do check it out. You can find it on Steam, it's in early access, $20 of your regional equivalent. So we'd recommend it to that crowd. And if you're looking for even more gaming recommendations based on your gaming history, can we point you in the direction of GameX.io? Once the site launches, you're going to be able to receive a host of gaming recommendations based on your Steam history, Xbox Live history, PSN history, the times, medieval times, the dawn of man. We have it all covered. Thanks for watching everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this review.